I'll now ask Mrs. Dunsmuir to take a roll call, and could members please indicate their attendance so that this can be recorded accurately for the minute. Mrs. Dunsmuir.
Thank you, Convener. Convener? Vice Convener?
Here.
Councillor Alphonse?
Here.
Councillor Bell?
Present.
Councillor Cameron?
Present.
Councillor Leslie Dunbar?
Present.
Councillor Gregg?
Here.
Councillor Hutchison? Councillor Imrie?
Here.
Councillor MacDonald?
Present.
Councillor McGregor?
Present.
Councillor Meny?
Here.
Councillor Stewart?
I'm here.
Mrs. Blackie?
I'm here.
Thank you. Reverend Dix?
Here.
Mr. Murray?
Here.
Mr. Paul?
Here.
Mr. Sansom?
Here.
And Ms. Scott?
Here.
Thank you very much, Convener.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunsmuir. Okay, so item 1.1, we have no urgent business. 2.1, the exempt appendix. Are we all content that that should be taken in private? Councillor? Oh. I see someone's hand up. I'm afraid I can't see who it is. Councillor Cameron?
Mr. Cameron, Convener.
Thank you, Convener. Last week at Operational Delivery, you very kindly agreed to questions on an exempt appendix being taken in private, obviously, before the main paper. Could I ask that we do this today so that we can deal with questions on 11.1 in private session before then dealing with item 10.3?
Yeah, Councillor Cameron, I'm happy to do that. I think what I did last week was we took some open questions, went into private for anything for that, and then we came back into the public session. But yes, happy for that to go ahead.
Thank you.
Are we otherwise content with taking the appendix in private?
Agreed.
Thank you. 3.1, declarations from members. Mr. Paul?
Yeah, thanks. So I've considered whether I'm required to declare an interest in 10.3 and 11.1 as head teacher of Bucksburn Academy. However, having applied the objective test, I consider that my interest is professional, not personal, and I'm on as a teacher rep. So I don't believe it requires me to remove myself from consideration of the item, but happy for that to be considered.
Thank you for that, Mr. Paul. Reverend Dix?
I think it's Mrs. Blackie, Convener.
Oh, sorry, Mrs. Blackie.
Again, with regards to Bucksburn Academy, I have a pupil at Bucksburn Academy, and I don't feel that it's necessary to remove myself because I'm a parent rep of a primary school.
Okay, thank you for that. Do we have any others? Okay, item 4.1, we've no requests for deputation. That takes us on to item 5.1, the minute of the previous meeting. Do we have any questions, or we Councillor Meny?
Thank you, Convener. It's under the exclusion policy section. It says that information on whether it would be possible to provide members with information on children who had been excluded on more than one occasion. Was this circulated? I may have missed it. Apologies if I have.
Convener, I can advise Councillor Menny, it was included in a service update that Education issued on the 2nd of December, but I can recirculate that for information if that would be helpful. It was as part of a multiple sort of update. So
okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Are we otherwise content to approve the minutes?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Item 6.1, there are no notices of motion. That takes us on to item 7.1, the committee business planner. Again, I can see someone's hand is raised.
There's Councillor Cameron and Mr. Sansom, Convener.
Okay, Councillor Cameron, I'll always take you in first. I'll ask Mr. Sansom.
Oh, you mean, okay. I didn't figure out which way around you were doing it. 2 points that arose from the kind of parent forum was the feedback on the ASM, modified ASM plan closed on the 23rd of December. Would it be appropriate to have a session in one of the next 2 meetings to discuss or see what happens to the plan as a result of that feedback? Because the intent is obviously to implement those changes in August of this year.
Ms. Shepherd.
Thank you, Convener. Mr. McDermott will continue to routinely update members of the committee in terms of progress. So I would presume that his next update will provide some detail and an opportunity for members to question it at that point. If the parent body felt it would be helpful, we'd be more than comfortable running a session with the citywide parent forum to make sure that everyone's fully sighted in terms of where we're at and where we anticipate next steps being.
That would be useful.
Thank you for that. Councillor Cameron and then Councillor Dunbar.
Thank you, Convener. My query is on page 13, the school estate plan. I noticed from a business planner that in March 2018, the Chief Officer Corporate Landlord was tasked with bringing a report to the committee within 9 months. We're now nearly 3 years later. It's being suggested that this gets pushed back to the summer of 2022. I don't think the rationale of the pandemic having an effect on this is really a good enough reason to take a report and make it 4 years later than it was originally called for. I would certainly like to see it much sooner than that. So I would like an officer's comment before I say anything else, if that's okay, Convener.
Mr. Booth.
Thank you, Convener. I think this is the same issue that was discussed at Operational Delivery Committee, and I think I've spoken at committees a few times around the rationale of taking the time to assess where we are at the moment and how we move the estate forward based on what we've learned over the last 9-10 months. I think I've said that to committee before, and that position remains.
Okay, Convener, in that case, I have a motion, but you maybe want to deal with the rest of the planner before I say anything.
Yeah, well, certainly if we have any further questions, we'll maybe take those first and then deal with the motion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Councillor Dunbar.
Thank you, Convener. My question's in relation to number 22, I think on page 12, the senior phase. I'm just checking to see if there's been any updating in terms of national guidance, which would then affect obviously our local framework. And I am particularly interested or concerned around, challenges in terms of supporting, for example, care experienced young people. Thank you.
Ms. Shepherd.
Thank you, convener. No national update as yet, Councillor Dunbar. A number of thematic reviews are currently being undertaken, particularly with a focus on the remote delivery. And again, we may have some signposts within those reports in terms of next steps. The SQA continue to consider the current situation and offer advice to schools. There's been nothing really of substance over the last week or so, but again, I'm happy to keep members up to speed in terms of where things are going. Many things are moving nationally. There does seem to be some movement around further education sector and arrangements with the Scottish Funding Council. So we're in a situation where there's lots and lots of change. I wonder if it might be easiest for me to just provide a service update to members in terms of all the moving parts at the moment. It would be hard to provide a report when we don't have many definitives at the moment, but certainly to acknowledge the rapidly changing environment that we're in currently, and I would be happy to do that.
Thank you, Mrs. Shepherd. That would be very helpful, convener. I think if we did get a service update in terms of the rapidly changing face of things at the moment. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions? Yes.
Second point. Is that? Can I talk?
I'm sorry.
Sorry, convener. It's Mr. Sansom. I think he had a second question.
Mr. Sansom.
Yeah. It's around the school estate plan, and as one of the councillors said, it's been deferred often, and it doesn't seem logical to have the overall plan discussed after you agree the Blackburn extension component. And there were a lot of concerns raised at the parent forum about things like, will the Countess Academy ever get built? It's already slipped 5 years. Is 300? How do we know 300 is the right number if we're not going to build any other schools? And what we're doing about the other several academies that are all showing 20% over capacity in around the 2024 timeframe. I'm aware that there's another algorithm that can be used and applied, and that might cure the problem. But there's a credibility issue about whether that algorithm will be correct. And finally, what is the short-term fix for Blackburn if this thing won't get built until at least 2 years' time, and they're already 100 short in the coming year?
Mr. Booth.
Convener, there's a few issues raised there. Obviously, the Bucksburn Academy, there is a report later on the agenda, so it might be better discussing the issues around Bucksburn Academy in the context of that report. Obviously, school capacity is something that the team review on a regular basis and make a number of amendments, tweaks, alterations to our school estate to ensure that we're able to meet all capacities on a short-term basis. So I can maybe answer that's an ongoing process around capacity throughout the estate. In relation to the estate plan, I think we've mentioned there is a significant change. I think the last question around the senior phase and what that looks like it is valid. Elsewhere in the agenda, we do relate to where we are with the Countess Wells project and Countess Wells Academy. The workshops are ongoing, and we've commissioned consultants around designing Countess Wells Secondary School, our community campus. That's a wider exercise that I can send further detail, but we'll look at the future of education, the future of what a community campus looks like, and will influence probably every other school we build in the next 10, 15 years. So there's a number of pieces of work ongoing that will influence the state's plan at the moment, if that gives any assurance.
Mr. Sansom?
Yeah, hang on. Thanks for the answer, but it still doesn't say that you'll take a wide discussion about the overall picture in the near term. That's the bit that I think's needed.
Okay, I'm happy to come in, but obviously as the learning state strategy is developed, that will be subject to our normal consultation processes.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Dunbar, is your hand a historical, or do you have another question? Councillor McGregor?
Thanks, Convener. I mean, we're all very aware that houses are being built, and there's plans for many more houses to be built. So I'm slightly concerned that we should be having a review kicked further down the road when we already have Section 75 agreements to provide school places for the children who will no doubt be living in these houses which we are building. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. Mr. Booth, have you anything to add? Or, Mrs. Cheers?
Thank you, Convener. Just to add to respond to Councillor McGregor's question, the Section 75, just to clarify, is not time limited. There's no trigger. It will be up to the local authority to provide that capacity and provision as and when they would see fit. And in terms of the overall planning process, it would carry out on an annual basis.
Well, thanks, Convener. Well, I appreciate that, but the houses are being built now and are being occupied now. The children are there. I don't think the children can hang on with their education waiting for a review that's coming. We're now told a further delay to it, a further 9 months down the road. But I mean, we need to get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. Just on the Section 75, you said that it's not time limited, but presumably that doesn't mean that we can just keep hold of the money forever. It's not time limited in the agreement, but what would are there any risks to not spending it, I suppose, is my question.
I'm happy to come in there, Convener. So all Section 75s are slightly different. Ms T's referred to the one at Bucksburn Academy, which isn't time limited. There will at some time be a degree of reasonableness around that, but the build-out rates at Rowett South are significantly different from what the developer originally anticipated as well, and that's obviously slowed over the last year also. Could I maybe just add that the update on the business planner is the update that was provided to the November committee, and as far as I'm aware, we've not altered that for this meeting. So when I referred earlier that we discussed this before, it was agreed in November, and there's not been a further update from officers since then. I think in that meeting we also advised committee that the team that do the state works have obviously been particularly busy over the last 8-9 months in terms of schools opening, schools closing, alterations been made within schools and supporting the education team around it, which is a further reason why the work's not progressed.
Thank you, Mr. Booth. I can see someone's hand up, but
Councillor Gregg, Convener.
Apologies, Councillor Gregg.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. I have a question further on in the committee business planner. for November 2021. So that's towards the end of the year. There's due to be a report on proposals for expanding the campus model. That seems a long way off for proposals when we are undoubtedly already looking at ways of developing the city campus to increase curriculum opportunities. So I'm sort of looking for reassurance that there's already work underway to do that expansion work. Therefore, I'm kind of presuming that that report will also be retrospective and will let us know what's been going on, because surely this is an excellent opportunity for us to be experimenting and to expand curriculum opportunities through the digital platform.
Thank you, Councillor Greg. Do you have an officer response?
Yeah, I can come in again there as well, convener. So that's the campus model for school provision. That's the work that's ongoing at the moment that we're working with Hubco around looking at future education provision, around breaking down the component parts of a community campus, just to understand what that means, almost come up with a shopping list of parts that a community campus might look at. That's the work that will influence the learning estate strategy, and something we look forward to bringing forward to committee for discussion when that work's been undertaken.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions? No, are we happy to? Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, convener. Even taking on board one of the last points Mr. Booth made about the fact that this schools estate plan was presented to the last committee and nobody raised anything there. I still think I'd like to put forward a motion in relation to this. And basically my motion would be that a school estate plan be presented to the committee at the March meeting. I'm quite happy to speak on it, but maybe you want to find out if I've got a seconder first.
Councillor Wheeler.
My microphone was switched off. Yes, do you have a seconder?
Councillor Wheeler, I did raise my hand as well, Councillor Wheeler. Maybe you missed.
Oh, yeah. Are you seconding Councillor Cameron, Councillor Mallett?
No. My question is that this item was already agreed in our last committee, and I agreed with Mr. Booth. It was no question raised then, and why Councillor Cameron is bringing just now. And this item was already agreed in city growth and resources as well, and there was no question about that. And Councillor Cameron is bringing his motion. How can it be? This item is already agreed in our two committees.
Yeah, Mrs. Dunsmuir, could we just take a 10-minute adjournment? Possible?
Yes, convener. The recording will still proceed, but if everybody could just switch off their cameras and their microphones, do you want me to set up a separate?
If you could, yes, that would be.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I ask a question?
Councillor Greg.
Yes. When you come back, would you be able to confirm if Councillor Cameron's motion is competent? I think that's fundamental. That would be helpful. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Greg.
Okay, convener. So if we start back at 22, thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Councillor Many.
I had my hand up to second Councillor Cameron's motion.
Okay, thank you. So it's a procedural motion, so we just go straight to the vote. Sorry, Councillor Gregg, you had a question regarding competency, and yes, it is an entirely competent procedural motion.
Thank you.
Mrs. Dunsmuir.
Thank you, convener. So the committee has before it a procedural motion in the name of Councillor Cameron, which is to take the school estate plan back to committee at an earlier date than on the planner, with the suggested date of the March meeting. So could members please vote for the procedural motion or against? Convener?
Against.
Vice convener?
Against.
Councillor Alphonse?
For.
Councillor Bell?
Against.
Councillor Cameron?
For.
Councillor Dunbar?
Against.
Councillor Gregg?
For.
Councillor Hutchison?
For.
Councillor Imrie?
Against.
Councillor MacDonald?
Against.
Councillor McGregor?
For.
Councillor Many?
For.
Councillor Stewart?
Against.
Mrs. Blackie?
For.
Reverend Dix?
Against.
Mr. Murray?
For.
Mr. Paul?
I'm going to abstain.
Mr. Sansom?
For.
Miss Scott?
For.
Sorry, was that for, Miss Scott?
Yes, 34.
Sorry, thank you. That's 10 votes for the procedural motion, 8 against and 1 abstention, convener.
Convener, can I refer it to the full council, please?
Sorry, can I just have a moment, convener? Sorry.
Sure.
Sorry.
I didn't quite hear the numbers anyway, so. Sorry, Councillor Cameron, you have your hand up. Is that a legacy or?
It was a legacy, but I wanted to ask a question in relation to this that Mrs. Dunsmuir will probably come back for it with anyway. Can you refer a procedural motion?
Sorry, convener, if I could just clarify what I was saying about the vote. Sorry, it was my mistake. I had forgotten where we don't have the third religious representative, so I thought the numbers hadn't added up. So it was 10 votes for the procedural motion and 8 against with 1 abstention. And if I could just have a moment to check the standing orders, if that's okay, in response to Councillor Cameron's question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Convener, would it be possible for me to just have a short recess, if that's okay? It would just need a couple of minutes, if that's all right.
Yes, absolutely. If we just take 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If you need any more time, just let me know.
Thank you. Convener, apologies for the delay. That Elaine and I are back in the meeting now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So just in relation to, I think it was Councillor Cameron's question about the competency of referral to council, Standing Order 34.1 says immediately following a vote at committee or subcommittee, 1/3 of the membership of the committee or subcommittee may refer the matter to council, a committee or subcommittee for a decision unless the convener determines otherwise. There's no mention in there that that does not apply to procedural motions, therefore it would be competent for a referral to be made. Thank you. So can I just check? Sorry, if was it Councillor Malik that was wanting to make the referral?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Thank
Steph,
you.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Sorry. Thank you, Councillor Malik. So in terms of apologies, sorry.
Thanks very much for clarity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of referral to council, it would be 1/3. So that would require seven members for that to happen.
Excuse me, Steph. Sorry, I know it's difficult on these things. I got lost there for a bit. Has the convener agreed that we should even consider it?
Convener. Convener, I think you might be on mute if you're talking.
I think the convener's dropped out of the meeting.
I think so. If you just give me 1 second, I'll try and call him back in. Thank you. Oh.
Well, I think he had an issue with his internet. He struggled Monday as well, so he might drop out then.
Thank you, everybody. If we just give him a moment to see if I can get him reconnected. Thank you. Apologies, everyone. I'm just trying to get hold of the convener and to see if he wants me to call him in on his mobile. I'll just be a moment. Councillor Wheeler?
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Are you okay to carry on over the phone, or do you want me to try and connect you again, or what's the best thing?
My laptop is currently updating.
Oh.
And it's on 30% at the moment, it's saying, so it could be some time.
Okay.
I think probably if Malik steps in just now, if he's got internet access, if he's on Teams, and I'll rejoin once this is up and running, because I'm not going to be able to chair the meeting from a phone. It's just going to be...
Convener, there was, before you dropped out of the meeting, Councillor Cameron was asking if you'd taken a decision in respect of the Standing Order 34.1 and the referral to Council.
Right, yes. Is there, were there the 7 people for it?
Councillor Cameron and Councillor Many have their hands up. I'm not sure if they have a question.
Yeah, I wonder if it's better to transfer this over to the Vice Convener just now rather than me trying to... I'll just listen into what's going on. Hopefully I'll get back online shortly.
My point is around requesting that the convener keep this at committee rather than undermining the position of our external reps. So if we've got the convener on the phone just now, I would request that he keep this at committee, please, rather than referring to council.
Agreed.
No, how can you agree when a vote has been taken place now, and then the required is we need 7 votes and we got 8.
No, sorry, sorry, Malik. Just hang on. The vote has not been taken as to whether it should be referred to full council. And my question of the convener, because we haven't had an answer to that, is has the convener agreed to accept your motion to refer to full council?
Councillor Cameron, sorry, if I can just clarify, the standing orders say that 1/3 of the membership may refer the matter unless the convener determines otherwise. So if 1/3 of the members, so that would be, as I'd advised, that would need to be 7 members.
No, with all due respect, Mrs. Dunsmuir, the people who voted before voted on whether or not to accept my motion.
Yes,
we have not voted on whether or not that should be referred to full council.
Yes,
and I think that's a very important point. Unless I've got it, and if I have got it wrong, Mrs. Dunsmuir, I will apologise.
No, sorry, thank you. Through you, convener. I was meaning that we still the 7 names would still have to be advised in terms of the referral. That wouldn't be just from the procedural motion. There would still require to be 7 people referring the matter to council.
Thank you, Mrs.
And it doesn't even need to get that far. If the convener says this is an education committee, there are external reps on the education committee, and they should be heard and voting. We shouldn't be having a vote to get rid of this education committee. and sidetrack it.
Very sorry, Councillor McGregor. That's not true at all that we're going to get rid of the committee. These are not appropriate words at all that we are using in this committee. How we can get rid of these external rep? They are part of this committee, but the matter can be referred to the full council.
Yeah, and you're going to have these external reps there as well.
Sorry, Mrs. Dunsmuir, has Councillor Malik taken over the chair of this committee?
I'm not actually clear. The convener is still on the line. Convener, can you please advise? Sorry.
I mean, it's one thing the convener being out of the meeting because of telephone links. It's another thing for him to make a decision on this.
I've just had a message to advise that Councillor Wheeler is struggling to hear anything. Would it be all right if it took a few minutes for me to try and let him rejoin the meeting?
Yes, please.
Yes. Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Councillor Malik, are you on the call?
Hello.
Hello, I understand. Are you chairing in place of Councillor Wheeler?
I thought you were trying to in touch with the Councillor Wheeler through his mobile phone. Did you?
I'll just bring him in. One moment. I'll try and bring him in.
Hello.
Hello, Councillor Wheeler.
I'm back in.
Oh, we're back in on the meeting. Right. Sorry. Okay. Sorry, I've just been calling you on the mobile. Apologies.
Call is not available. Please leave your message after the tone. After you've finished your message, just hang up. Or to hear more options, please press 1.
Right. Apologies, convener. That's the call closed off now. So, do you need me to go back over where we were, or?
Yes, I'm sorry. Where did we get to in terms of the numbers and so on?
So yes, so in terms of moving the procedural motion and referring it to council, that is competent. However, it would require 7 members to say that they want that to happen, unless you determine otherwise. And I would need the 7 names.
Okay, and will you take a roll call or something, or?
Can I come in, please?
Yeah.
I think it's really disappointing that Councillor Malik is wanting to bypass this committee because the vote hasn't gone his way, and the convener has the power to keep this at committee, according to the words that we're hearing, unless the convener decides otherwise. So I would request that the convener keep this in committee and not refer this to a vote to go to council, especially in the interests of the external representatives. Otherwise, this looks like an absolute shambles, and we're undermining the democratic process of this committee. We don't want to be undermining the role of our external representatives by referring this to council, because they don't sit on council, and we know that. So I really would urge convener, please keep this at committee.
Thank you, Councillor Many. Councillor Malik.
Thanks very much, convener. I am not overtaking from convener. He is in charge of the committee. I'm very sorry, Councillor Many. I do not agree with you. When Councillor Wheeler actually had an issue of his connection, and we were unable to actually see him, or we can not hear from him. So I said that yes, that when one of the councillors actually used very poor language, that we are excluding the external member. We are not excluding the external member at all. They are part of the committee, and that's why I intervene. And
Councillor Malik, with respect, if we are referring this to council, we are undermining our external members, and I don't remember you officially taking the chair, as Councillor Wheeler was in the call, and vice convener can only take the chair if the convener is not present, and he was present via phone, and he has not made that decision yet, and I am asking him to keep this at committee.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Dunsmuir, I'm a little confused as to where we are. Has the vote taken place when I was absent, or no?
No, convener, the only vote has been on the procedural motion, so we would still need the 7 names if this is to be referred to council.
But only if you decide.
And do we have 7 names?
No, you first of all have to decide, convener, whether or not you want this to go to council, or whether you want to keep it with your committee.
Convener, it's Councillor Stewart here. I wonder if I just may say a word. I know we're in difficult times and we're struggling with the connections and so on, and I appreciate that. But I do think the other members should appreciate the position of the chair and be more respectful and stop the interjections and give the convener a chance. It's really not helpful for either of the SNP councillors. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. So I'm sorry, Mrs. Dunsmuir, are there 7?
I haven't been advised of any names, convener. Do you?
Okay, I have a number of hands up for excuse me, Councillor Many. I've taken you in already. Mrs. Blackie was there. No. Councillor Alphonse.
Sorry, convener.
Sorry, this is an educational. This is education meeting. This is the education committee, and this needs to remain here. I'm sorry.
Sorry, convener. I actually do agree. It is education, and it should remain education, especially with external members involved. And if it goes to full committee and external members cannot have their say, I think that's disadvantaged, because we are representing parents as well for our committees as well. So I do feel it's unfair if we can't be represented at that if it goes to full council.
Thank you.
Convener, in terms of the standing order, it's either 7 members. It's 7 members for a referral unless you determine otherwise. So if I would need the 7 names if it's to be referred, if that's what's been moved by Councillor Malik.
I'd like to put my hand up, convener, and be.
Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, if we're moving to that, I'd like to put my hand up. If we were in the chamber just now, we'd be putting our hands up to say that we would want it moved to full council. Thank you.
If everybody could put their hands down, that might be the best way to do it, if the hands are just raised, and then I can read out the names if the hands are raised.
Sorry, convener, I've had my hand up for some time because I still don't think I've had an answer to my specific question. And my specific question was, as convener, are you happy to have this referred to council if there are 7 votes, bearing in mind that the standing orders were changed by this administration not that long ago, and in the past conveners have prevented things being taken to full council when raised by when the opposition had asked for it. Here's an opportunity, having heard everything that's being said, to make a decision one way or the other as to whether it's to go to full council. I don't think it's correct that we should find 7 names and then decide whether or not it's going to full council. And that, to me, seems to be what's happening here. If you as convener say, yes, you're quite happy for it to go to the vote to find out if there are 7 people wanting to refer it to full council, then so be it. That's your position as convener. But I still have to hear you, excuse me, say that. Thank you, convener, for your indulgence.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Councillor Cameron, sorry, could I just ask you to put your hand back down, please? Okay, Ms. Dunsmuir.
Convener, there's would the committee prefer to just raise hands, or would you prefer me to go through the names and people say if they were willing to support the referral to council?
I think possibly raising hands is the easiest, quickest and easiest way to deal with this.
Okay, at the moment there are hands raised from Councillor Malik, Councillor Stewart, Councillor Alphonse and Councillor Cameron. Sorry, I don't have a hand up, and I would have thought a roll call would be a lot easier, Convener, especially after the technical difficulties we've got. Thank you. Convener?
So I can see 3 hands.
Decisions, we want words.
Would you go for roll call, Convener?
Convener, can you hear?
Yes.
Yes. Would you prefer? Would it be easier if I went through the roll call, just as there are some technical difficulties today?
Yes, that's okay. Fine, Mrs. Dunsmuir.
I'll just take everybody's name, and if you could indicate if you support the referral to council or you do not support it. Convener? Convener?
I think possibly come back to me, Mrs. Dunsmuir. I'm still pondering the issue here, because I think there is a bit of an issue with this, okay, as far as I can see.
Vice Convener? Vice Convener?
Sorry, yes.
Councillor Alphonse?
Absolutely not.
Councillor Bell?
I don't support it.
Councillor Cameron?
I don't support it either.
Councillor Dunbar?
Defer to council.
Councillor Gregg?
Remain at Education Committee.
Councillor Hutchison?
Not a chance. Keep it at this committee.
Councillor Imrie?
I support it.
Support the referral to council. Sorry, Councillor Imrie. Yeah. Councillor MacDonald?
Support the referral to council.
Councillor McGregor?
Well, that's very interesting. No, of course you have to keep this at education. Thank you.
Councillor Many?
With the risk of completely undermining this committee, I absolutely do not support this.
Councillor Stewart?
I don't support it.
Pardon, sorry, Councillor Stewart, I didn't hear.
I don't support it.
Don't support, thank you. Mrs. Blackie?
Don't support it.
Reverend Dix?
Don't support it.
Mr. Murray?
No.
Mr. Paul?
No.
Mr. Sansom?
No.
And Ms. Scott?
No.
Convener, we have 4 in support, so there aren't 7 names, even if you are to support it.
Okay, thank you. I think committee has spoken. We will move on in that case to item 8.1 with no referrals from committee, which takes on to item 9.1, the performance management report. Do we have any questions for officers? Councillor Many.
I think it's Councillor Imrie, Convener, unless, oh no, Councillor Many has got her hand up, apologies.
Thank you, Convener. Page 21, the early learning and childcare settings inspections. I note that these will be fully outlined to local authorities by the end of 2020 calendar year. Did this happen? Did we get an update?
Ms. Shepherd.
Thank you, convener. No, we haven't had an update at the moment, Councillor Many. When I am advised, I'll make sure that all members of the committee are made aware.
Thank you, Ms. Shepherd. Do we have an estimation of when we're going to get that back, or what sort of timeline are we looking at?
Thank you. Through you, convener. I think it will depend on when schools reopen fully to children and young people. Certainly, I'm not picking up on anything rumbling around nationally at all in terms of a resume date for that, but I will keep members up to date of any changes to that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, convener. Page 27, what's the level measures in relation to free school meals? I note that we compare, I was going to use language that is probably totally inappropriate in terms of, it's a pity we have to give anybody free school meals, that we're in a society that has to happen. So I notice in primaries 1 to 3, and well, 1 to 3 is there anyway, but in 4 to 7 we have figures of in the 80%, which is comparable with the national figure for 2020. But when we go into secondary schools, we are way below the comparable figure, 70% on average across Scotland, but we are down in the low 50s. Is there an explanation as to why that's the case?
Ms. Shepherd.
Thank you, convener. I think we've got some further work to fully understand that. I know a report, I think, has been taken back to committee in June, and I would expect a full analysis of what we found out in terms of the data there to be available in that committee report.
Thank you for that. I had a second question, convener, if that's okay.
Yes.
Page 29, in relation to the pupil-teacher ratio, we have a higher pupil-teacher ratio than the national figure. I do note that we did go down slightly from 2019 to 2020. Is this a feature of our current teacher FTE in post, and we're working towards reducing this, or is there another reason for this?
Shepherd.
I think there are a combination of factors. All teachers in post are reflected in that data. Members will be aware that we have had less challenge in terms of filling posts, so that will have positively filtered through there as well. It will also take account of any additional staff who have been, where we've had the funding to recruit over the course of the pandemic, and also any appointments or additionalities made as a result of PEF funding. So it may well change a little over the next year or so, Councillor Cameron.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Many, your hand's still up.
Yeah, sorry, I was looking through my notes. I've got another question around the additional support applications. I'm noting that the request for assistance procedure is being moved to a single electronic system, and there's not yet a set turnaround for the system. It's between 10 and 15 days. Why is this not set at the moment? Is that looking to change, or what are the plans around that?
Shepherd.
Thank you, convener. Yes, Mr. McDermott, who's a report before you today, has worked extremely hard to have one single referral system. And obviously, by moving to a digital system, we're able to capture far better data around turnaround timescales. I know that process is almost concluded now, and we certainly would be in a position to be a lot more confident in terms of when referrals come in and when those needs are met as we move forward. I would expect that Mr. McDermott will actually be sharing some of that data through his routine supporting learners updates that come before this committee at regular intervals.
Thank you. And my other question was around the, on page 26, the turnaround time for nursery to P1 requests, particularly remains above 40 days. Are we confident that these will all be processed in time? What sort of timescale are we looking at?
May I take that one, convener?
Sorry, Mr. McDermott. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Through you, convener. Yes, absolutely. There's a calendar of dates produced specifically to look at the nursery to primary one. When colleagues and I produced that calendar of dates much earlier in 2020, we had just gone into lockdown. So one of the reasons that it still sits above 40 days is that we had actually budgeted additional time for visiting children and young people in nursery settings as part of that procedure. And because we anticipated a limited level of staff movement between settings over the course of a week, we'd budgeted in additional time. So it's very much under review, and moving forward, we'd very much be looking for that to be below the 40-day marker.
Thank you. You happy with that, Councillor Many? Councillor Hutchison.
Yep, thank you, convener. My question's on page 24 under the COVID-related absences. I can find it again. I was just going to ask a couple of questions around about that. Obviously, as a result of COVID situation at the moment, we've currently got vast majority of people doing their learning online. So first, I was going to ask, going forward, are absences due to lack of digital equipment and internet access going to be recorded under COVID-related absence? And is there any scope for that to be recorded a figure in its own right? And also, just on that point, I realise we're only a few days into the school term, but are we aware of any significant issues around about this matter? Thank you.
Shepherd.
Thank you, convener. Thank you for the question. The change in operating environment has almost led to us have to review very much the data that we're capturing and using to evaluate our own performance. We ask that all children log in at a set period in the school day currently, really very much as both a learning check but also a well-being check, because that obviously allows us the opportunity to follow up with any families who may be experiencing issues for a range of reasons.
It's long, no.
Hopefully what will be of some assurance is that currently across the city we have 97% of learners engaging with the digital offer, and staff in all schools continue to follow up where children aren't being able to engage with the curriculum. As a service, we've issued in excess of 12,000 Chromebooks and a number of tablets as well for children and young people to engage. So I'm not seeing it reported back that actually the devices are presenting a challenge, but obviously we continue to engage with families to make sure that we do get early warning of any issues. Most schools have, over the course of the last couple of weeks, ran a simple survey to get some early feedback, and certainly the education service would intend to issue a more extensive survey, which will look quite similar to the one issued during the first period of lockdown, so that we can actually do some direct comparison with our performance now compared to then. We are changing very much what we are looking at in terms of monitoring our performance. And again, we would be keen to continue the pattern that we'd gone into last term, where we're regularly providing members with a service update in terms of what the data is telling us. There is no, although probably important to say, there is no statutory duty on parents to actually ensure their children do engage with the remote offer. So we do have to be quite sensitive in terms of how we're approaching families.
Thank you, that's very helpful and reassuring.
Councillor Alphonse.
Thank you, convener. What I wanted to ask was for children living in disadvantaged households, obviously the Scottish Government have provided new devices and mobile data along with help to use the internet confidently and safely. Are there any, are they experiencing any difficulties that we should be made aware of? And are children from disadvantaged households keeping up with homeschooling? How can we gauge this? Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, convener, we can do a check using Google Analytics, which is actually a suite of data that we can pull out of our use of Google Classroom to give us a measure of which families and which children are engaging with Google Classroom. Schools can pull that out at individual school level, and we can pull that out at local authority level. So we have a very, very clear picture. We have anything ranging from, I think last I looked, at 99.7% engagement down to early 80s. But the average is 97% engagement across the board. As you say, it's early days at the moment, and schools are being really proactive in terms of approaching families to try and identify if there are any issues. The issue that we experienced last time, which was around the provision of Chromebooks, we're not seeing that reported through to us this time. You're absolutely correct. A number of devices were provided as part of the Connecting Scotland Fund. The local authority, in addition, invested heavily in Chromebooks over the last 9-10 months to make sure that we were in a stronger position this time around. Again, we would expect to share any learning that comes through the survey that we would hope to issue next week, because that probably is where we'll get some kind of indication of some of the challenges that are being faced by families at the moment.
That's great, thank you very much. I've got another question on the needs category for social, emotional and behavioural needs. It's sitting at 40.8%. I just wondered if this figure is risen due to COVID, and if so, how we address this?
Through you, convener, I think there'll be absolutely no doubt that COVID will have impacted on our children and young people, and it's an ongoing challenge in terms of trying to interpret that and make sure that we're ahead of the game. Hopefully, what will be of some reassurance is that we are very routinely and regularly looking at the wellbeing information coming through to make sure that we build a system not only just for now, but for a system that's fit for purpose in a year, 2 years, 5 years time. But it's a rapidly evolving picture. There is no doubt that I think families are feeling a little different during lockdown 2 than they probably were during lockdown 1. So it's a rapidly changing situation, which we keep analysing, looking at all of the research papers coming through so that we can respond as strongly as possible.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you. I've got one more question. I don't know if it's maybe relevant right now, but I'll come in later. I'll come in later with the next one.
Okay. Do we have any further questions? Or are we happy to note the report? Councillor Many.
I have an amendment in on this one, but can it be circulated to members, please?
Yeah, Mrs. Dunsmuir.
Yes, convener, will arrange for that to happen, for it to be displayed. Thank you. Convener, my colleague's having a slight technical issue getting it to display. I'll just see if I can display it on the screen instead, if you give me one moment. I think it has been emailed round, however.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hopefully everybody can see that now.
Convener, I wonder if I can ask a question about that.
Sorry, Councillor Stewart. Yes, go ahead.
Well, I've read it a few times, and I'm just actually wondering if it's competent. I'm not trying to put a spanner in the works, but I'm just wondering, would that not be what officers are doing anyway? Find out what they will have in place, ways where they would normally engage with families who require preschool meals, and if that is the case, would that not just be something that come as a service update, and is that not really an operational matter rather than making it part of a recommendation in a report? You know, I mean, I would have thought that is what Mrs. Shepherd and her team do, is making sure that all children are getting, all those that qualify would be getting school meals. That's part of their day job, and I'm not being rude, I'm just saying it. I just don't think it's necessary, the recommendation.
Yeah, my understanding is there's work already underway in relation to this. I don't know if Ms. Shepherd, you could comment on that.
I think Mr. McGowan's on the call as well, Councillor Wheeler. I'm not sure which.
If Mr. McGowan's there, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks to you, convener. Yeah, this is, as Ms. Shepherd noted earlier, we are bringing a report back later. I think it's the June committee on where free school meals will be covered. So it is something we're looking at. The data is presented there, and sorry, my screen's gone blank. Apologies a second. Sorry, convener, my screen's just disappeared. Yes, in terms of Councillor Stewart's comments there, yeah, it's something to look at. Apologies, my screen's gone blank here, so I can't actually see the motion in front of me. Apologies, if I can have a minute.
Yeah, certainly. Just it's up on the screen now. So.
Yeah, sorry. Yes. Yes, we do take steps. Obviously, at the moment, there's a number of steps that we take. So that would include, for example, council tax reduction, comparisons against CMIS records, applications that we receive ourselves, for example, and benefit assessment will also take checks. So there are a number of steps that are already in place, and they are going to be reported on, as has already been noted, convener.
Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Benny, the amendment that you're proposing is, I suppose, relates to work that's already underway, and that is already going to be reported through committee.
I mean, the report that I was reading is saying that they're going to look into things like how COVID has impacted uptake. This amendment is asking that we look further into the historical data that we're seeing in this report, where there is a massive disparity of secondary school pupil uptake. I mean, if we're comparing the 2019 figures to the 2020 figures and comparing that between the P4 uptake, it's actually widening in this city for secondary school pupils. And basically the amendment is just asking if can we look at that a bit further, because there's obviously something going on in Aberdeen that's affecting uptake, especially if we're comparing it to the national figures, whereby P4 figures are higher in Aberdeen nationally, and then they significantly drop comparatively to the national figures when we're looking at secondary schools. So all I'm asking for is for this to be looked at in further depth, and I did discuss this with officers, and that's what this amendment's looking for. So I don't see why this would be. I would hope that committee would support that.
Yeah, Mr. McGowan, is this something that could be accommodated within the reports that are coming up? I'm just conscious, Councillor Many, that obviously what we don't want to do is create additional work for something that's already underway and is going to be reported. So I'm just trying to establish whether Mr. McGowan's reports will capture what you're looking for. Mr. McGowan?
Yes, convener, through yourself. It's certainly something we'd be looking at, yeah. It's important data that's been highlighted in there, and again, as Ms. Shepherd highlighted earlier, it's something we'll be reviewing when we bring the report back. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. I mean, Councillor Many, are you content that providing that data is captured in the reports that are already on the agenda. I mean, we don't want to be, especially at this point in time, I suppose, with everything else officers are.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, there shouldn't be a problem accepting the amendment. We're acknowledging that there's an issue here with free school meal uptake in secondary school pupils, and I think as a committee we have responsibility to acknowledge that. And if it's going to be included in the report, I don't see there being an issue accepting this amendment at committee today.
So I think the issue I would have is that you're asking for a separate report. So if you're content that it will be captured in the reports that are already coming to committee.
Can I ask if it can be specifically included in the business statement?
Convener, could I just clarify? Sorry, it's Councillor Many's amendment, the last wording, and include that in the free school meals report due to committee in June 2021. So is Councillor Many with that wording saying it would just be in the existing report?
Councillor Many?
Yes, that's why I worded it that way.
Okay. Are members content with that?
Agree.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Yes.
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 9.2, supporting learners. Do we have any questions for officers? Councillor Many.
Thank you. So on page 32, 3.1.2, I just wanted to note that the issues around poverty, food and finance, mental health and well-being, the increases in instances of domestic violence, substance misuse, it's quite concerning that these are evident. How are we responding to this in terms of the education perspective?
Ms. Shepherd.
Thank you, convener. I think probably the most important thing to say is it's absolutely critical that we have an educational response, but as part of a wider community planning partnership approach. It's become very, very clear over the last 9-10 months that actually it would be impossible to actually separate the needs of the child from the needs of the family. So we are absolutely looking at the data, looking at the needs of children and young people, adapting our approaches, trying to make sure that we have resource in the right place to support children, but very much working with community planning partners to make sure that we are sharing trends that we're identifying in the data and very much wrapping around families who need our support alongside other community planning partners.
Thank you for that. Councillor Many.
Thank you for that answer. I've just got another question around the report highlighting their challenges for families with autistic children and those with ADHD. Given the complex situation of lockdown and families having to isolate in smaller bubbles, what additional support is being provided to support the families, and how are they responding to that?
Shepherd.
Thank you, convener. Very difficult, Councillor Many, to give you a simple answer to that, because the needs of all children with a diagnosis of autism spectrum condition or indeed ADHD are really quite varied and different. You'll know that in the current national guidance that we are working to, that there's an ask that we support the children of key workers and vulnerable children. And each school has very much looked at their school communities to identify those children who would benefit from a variety of supports. In some cases, that may be attending school 5 days a week. In some cases, that may be attending school a day a week. In other cases, that support may be more of more outreachy in nature. So it may be a case of meeting a youngster for a walk, for example, or offering a different kind of supported intervention through Google Classroom, or working, inviting small groups potentially into the school grounds for an intervention. So really, really difficult. We have had to look at the needs of each individual child and young person. We are committed as an education system to keep our lists, if you like, of vulnerable children and young people constantly under review, because we recognise, and what we learned from the first period of lockdown, is that some children actually maybe cope better than we would have anticipated they would, whilst others don't cope quite as well as we would have liked. So sorry to not give a terribly clear answer, but it does depend on a number of factors and on understanding the needs of that individual child.
I think the convener's possibly just dropped out of the call. If you can just give him a moment to just come back in, if that's okay.
Hello.
Hi, convener, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can.
Sorry. I think Mrs. Shepherd had just finished the answer to your question. So.
Right, okay. Sorry, is there anyone else with their hands up, Mrs. Dunsmuir?
Not that I can see, convener. Oh, Councillor Many has. Apologies.
Oh, Councillor Many.
Hi, let me just find my notes. Yeah, it's on page 32, 3.2.2. I'm seeing that the increase in requests for assistance is quite significant, but we can only see the data up to the end of November. I was just wondering, has the trend on the increase continued from November, or has it started evening out? Do we know?
May I take that one, convener?
Mr. McDermott.
Oh, thank you, convener, and thank you for the question, Councillor Many. Yes, if you look at the same graph as the term progressed last term, it has started to flatten out. And I think at last look, the kind of weekly average was sitting around about 13, 14 requests for assistance per week.
Thank you. And in terms of page 37, it's a separate question. Bridge of Dawn is omitted from the figures as no requests were put through. Do we know why this is? Is it a visibility issue of the system for Bridge of Dawn, or because I do note further down the report it highlights that increases elsewhere could be linked to visibility of the system. So is there lack of visibility in Bridge of Dawn why we're seeing no figure? Does that make sense?
Mr. McDermott.
Again, through you, convener. Thank you. So in this particular instance, it can be attributed to how we look at the data, whether we look at it through the child's postcode or whether we look at it through the school that they attend, in terms of children attending a school that's out with their zone. And obviously this is just one particular data set that focuses on one particular set of requests for assistance. So it's not saying that we're not receiving requests for assistance from the Bridge of Dawn area or ASG. It's just very much the lens at which this was taken.
Thank you.
Convener, I'm not seeing the hands in the chat, but I've been advised Mrs. Blackie and Councillor Alphonse have their hands up.
Okay, Mrs. Blackie.
Yes, on page 39, 4.1, you're saying that you've got, but it's been budgeted for extra teachers and support staff for supporting children with additional support. What training has these teachers and support staff got? Because I know that it's very limited when it comes to teacher training. And is it just going to be one-to-one support with the support worker? And just basically, how is it going to work?
Mr. McDermott.
Thank you. Sorry for the delay. My camera disappeared. Through you, convener. So there's a couple of points there that the teachers and the pupil support assistants referred to in 4.1 haven't been recruited yet, as they are part of the redesign process. However, as you're aware from previous reports to committee, that professional learning is something that's very high on the agenda of the support and learners offer. So that would definitely be taken into account, as would skills and experience when we're looking at recruitment. Similarly, another sort of vein of the professional learning that we're looking at with the support and learners is really looking at how we make best use of the skills and expertise that exist within our specialist settings, and how they can be used to enhance our professional learning offer for staff. Lastly, there was a part of the question in relation to the kind of ratios there, and the staffing ratios would be using those that are agreed nationally in accordance with the SNCT, the Scottish Negotiating Committee for Teachers, which have specified ratios in relation to additional support needs.
Mrs. Blackie, are you?
That's great. Thank you for your answer.
Councillor Alphonse.
Thank you, convener. I'm just going back to the point that Councillor Many raised about the data for Bridge of Dawn Academy. Mr. McDermott's put my mind at a slight ease. Because I was finding it quite concerning. There was no data at all from any pupil at Bridge of Dawn Academy, and just wanted to ensure that the pupils at Bridge of Dawn have the same access to the system as the rest of the city. Thank you.
Mr. McDermott.
Through you, convener, and thank you very much for your question. Yeah, I can give that assurance that the visibility of the system is the same for staff, schools across the city. As I say, it's purely the lens at which that data has been presented. And apologies, I believe my camera has disappeared again.
Thank you very much. That's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Do you have any further questions?
I don't believe there are any hands up, convener.
Are we happy to agree the recommendations in the report?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 10.1 is early learning and childcare reports. Do we have any? Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, convener. In that report at 3.20, there is mention of the 27 capital projects for ELC expansion. It's good that I think is that 3 or 4 have been completed, so we still have 23 which are scheduled for completion by August. So that is 7 months away, 9 months away. Could we have an update on achieving that target? Because we do want to ensure consistency of provision across the city. So it would be useful to know where we are with the other capital projects for ELC expansion. Thank you.
Through you, convener.
Sorry,
we're having capital projects be handed over all the time, Councillor Gregg. Given the number, I wonder if it might be easier to circulate a paper to give members just an update of where things are and when they're programmed to conclude, if that's helpful.
I would really appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. That's positive.
Thank you for that. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, convener. It's a follow-up from Councillor Gregg's question. We have a budget for this. How are we doing with this capital budget in terms of delivery? Are we going to deliver on budget, under budget, or are we going to be like a lot of the projects that have happened over the last 9 years, end up over budget?
Ms. Shepherd.
Thank you, convener. Yes, Councillor Cameron, the killer question, isn't it? There's no doubt that the pandemic has impacted on costs. I guess if you consider supply chain issues, we've had to take those into account. The team have worked exceptionally hard to reprofile spend where we've had to, and say we continue to look at particular challenges. We still do anticipate coming in on budget, but we have had to do some reprofiling to take account of the challenges that have been presented as a result of the pandemic.
Thank you for that. And, possibly if we could get an update on that when convenient, that'd be useful as well.
Happy to do so, Councillor.
I have Councillor Many.
Thank you, convener. It's just a question on page 47 around the applications for ELC nurseries moving online. What's being done to ensure accessibility for those who don't have access to computers or cannot use computers?
Convener, if you're happy, I'd like to address this question.
Sorry, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Many. That's something we have been considering, and for those who are struggling either using the online form, we have produced a guide to the application and a how-to video working with our colleagues and customer to take parents step by step through the online application in case they are struggling. For those parents that may not have a device or accessibility to Wi-Fi, especially with libraries currently being closed, we do have paper copies that will be available from the school, and we also have the early years central team that will be available to support and process those applications on parents' behalf.
Thank you. That answers my question and it's reassuring. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions? Are we happy to agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
I've got an amendment on this one as well, if it could be circulated.
Mrs. Dunsmuir.
Yep, I'll just get that circulated, convener, and displayed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Convener, it's Councillor Stewart here. I don't know if you can see me or not, or hear me for that matter.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you very much, Convener. I was just saying, I mean, is that really necessary to have that as a recommendation, given that our funding comes from the Scottish Government anyway, and well, certainly they should be providing that support. So, you know, is that not just stating the obvious? You know, I'm bamboozled with this sort of approach, really. And at my heart, I most certainly have the children as the focus. And as a mother, of course, I have been given that very grateful honour. So I think this is just muddying the waters in another election year, as was said at a previous committee. I don't see any point in having that. Just need to get on with business on the day. Thank you very much, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart.
Convener, could I just check if Councillor Many has a seconder? Sorry.
Yes, I'll second Councillor Many.
I'll be moving the recommendations as they are. Do I have a seconder?
Sorry, thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Yeah, I mean, I'll be moving the recommendations. I think they're sufficient as they are. And actually, throughout my time as the convener of this committee and the committee that the education committee we had previously, I have tried my best to ensure that we don't bring party politics into it as far as possible, because I think that at the end of the day, the education and care of our children is the most important thing we can do. So I don't see the amended recommendations from Councillor Many as remotely necessary. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Convener. I would just concur exactly with what you have said.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Councillor Many.
Thank you, Convener. The amendment, I feel, was a good opportunity to acknowledge as a committee that this is a very welcome funding package from the Scottish Government. I'm sorry that the rest of certain members of the committee feel that it's politically motivated. It's not. I believe it's a positive initiative, and as a full-time working mother to a 2-year-old who will directly benefit from this, I wanted to acknowledge that and give some time on speaking about some of the benefits during this committee. Once implemented, this policy has so many layers that will positively impact the lives of children's families and society. Early years development is one of the most important stages of a child's development, and if we don't get it right in the early years, this can have an impact on the child throughout the rest of their childhood, through adolescence and into adulthood. And for our vulnerable children, and we can see in the Support and Learners data capture report in front of us today that due to COVID, instances of mental health and wellbeing issues, substance misuse, poverty and domestic abuse are increasing. And these are all factors that can negatively impact a child's well-being, development and resilience if they're present in their home. We don't yet know the full extent of the long-term social fallout of this pandemic. However, by delivering this transformative expansion of early learning and childcare in August, we can help ensure that some of our most vulnerable children are given a stable and nurturing environment in their nursery, encourage positive attachments with their nursery caregivers, and build resilience among children in the city in their early years, and continue to work towards our commitment of giving every child the best start in life. And further, this policy is hugely beneficial to working families. As I mentioned earlier, I myself will benefit from this when it's implemented in August in Aberdeen, saving over 4,500 per child per year for families. And it gives a child's primary caregiver the choice, without the worry of childcare costs, to return to work or education if that's what they want to do. And I believe that giving parents this choice is a vital step in tackling the gender inequality within the workplace. We as a council have the privilege of delivering this policy in Aberdeen, fully funded by our Scottish Government. And there's fantastic work being undertaken, as we've heard today, by our officers and staff in getting this set up for August. And I genuinely am looking forward to seeing this delivered in our city, which is why I put forward this amendment as a positive amendment for today's committee. And I genuinely can't wait to see the short-term and long-term benefits to the people in this city and the children in this city. And I'll end it there. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Many. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you very much, Convener. I agree with everything that Councillor Many said, so I'm not even going to repeat any of that. I accept your first statement, Convener. I think you do try exceptionally hard to keep politics out of this and to do the best we can for education. It's just a pity that other members of the administration don't go the same way. Unlike Councillor Stewart, I'm not a mother, but I'm a father and I'm a grandfather, and I have a granddaughter that will benefit from this particular one, and I'm absolutely delighted about that. And I find it quite hypocritical of the administration members who seem to be dead against this, when all we're asking is that we acknowledge this extra money that is coming from the Scottish Government as a grant in order to deliver the early learning facilities. The administration are very quick to complain about being the lowest funded council in Scotland, never getting enough money, wanting a fair share. There is almost a day, not a day goes past that in the local press, the co-conveners or the co-leaders of the council are complaining about not getting something from the Scottish Government, writing to the Scottish Government, writing to the UK Government by bypassing the Scottish Government looking for money. And here we have a situation where the money is forthcoming, it's there, we're seeing the fruits of that. We're going to, by August, be in a situation where we can deliver this to the children in our city, and still this political administration wants to stop us saying thank you for this particular capital grant. I find it very strange that we have a situation like this in committee today. We've just seen it earlier in committee. I hope that, and I would urge the committee to support Councillor Many's amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. So we go into debate if anyone wishes to enter.
I think Councillor Dunbar had her hand up, convener.
Sorry, Councillor Dunbar.
Hello, I was actually trying to get in much earlier in regard to questions or the question specifically that David Cameron had asked in terms of funding, you know, like from the Scottish Government, and whether you know, if there's an overrun in terms of expenditure for the capital programme, whether the Scottish Government are looking to meet that additional cost. You know, often, as we're hearing, it may be due to difficulties around the pandemic.
Convener, we've moved into debate.
I appreciate that. Apologies, Councillor Dunbar. I didn't realise that you had raised your hand during questions, so my apologies for that.
Thank you.
Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, convener. I certainly welcome the additional funding and the priority that the Scottish Government have given to early learning and childcare. I think it's right to be grateful for the quite significant amount of additional funding, capital and revenue, that's been allocated and that we benefited from in the city for the last 5 years. However, I'm not clear on how I'm going to go with this vote, because there's mention in the amendment of a multi-year funding package. Well, that's true, but you know, I have concerns about not just the past, the funding, welcome as it's been, but also about the future commitment of the Scottish Government to sustain, in particular, the revenue costs for early learning and childcare. Perhaps Councillor Many can provide some information on whether there are plans for an earmarked distinct ELC component coming to local authorities, coming to Aberdeen City Council into the future, or not. If ELC money is going to be mainstreamed, you know, it could just disappear into our allocated revenue budgets. So much as I welcome that funding that we've received, and I appreciate it will bring huge benefits, but this is an ongoing commitment that we need to sustain in the interests of young people and families. So that's why I'm not sure. Maybe in the course of the debate and the summings up, I'll get a little bit of clarity about this, but currently it's a little ambiguous. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gregg. Councillor MacDonald.
Yes, thank you very much, convener. A lot of what I was going to say was actually covered by Councillor Gregg. I think that's absolutely right. That you know that it is money that is welcome, but we have seen so often in the past that the responsibility of these things not being fully funded can, and I'm saying can, not will, come back to the local authorities. So it's absolutely right that that there are question marks around that. Is this going to be fully funded? It was really that's the question that Councillor Dunbar had been posing as well. So absolutely, I think I'll be voting with yourself, convener, and going with the recommendations, because it was quite surprising as well to and yes, we do try and talk education when we come to this, but it was the case that Councillor Cameron did stray into that kind of political rhetoric when it came to the piece. So on this occasion, I will be voting with you.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, convener. Just to start by saying, this is a simple case of, to me, this is a simple case of welcoming money that's coming into our city. I'm sure you and your colleagues wouldn't have hesitated to support similar money coming into our city in the past, and certainly when it's been from the UK government. And certainly, this addendum, to my mind, it's only political if you decide the Scottish government is political, and that the expansion of childcare is something that's subject to debate and isn't the subject of cross-party support. I think all of us in this committee agree that expansion of childcare is a welcome thing. I don't have any issue welcoming funding from the UK government when it's for something that I support in this city. I don't necessarily see why it should be an issue welcoming in this case when it's money from the Scottish government instead. I assume you don't disagree with the expansion of childcare. Presumably it's a source of the funding that you and your colleagues are taking issue with, that you see as being political, but I'd say that's perhaps a matter of interpretation rather than of what's in the motion itself. And in terms, I'll just come on quickly to what Councillor Gregg mentioned, his speech about in terms of future years. We are a few months away from an election, not in terms of being political, but in terms of there may be a change of government after May. It's not the place of the current government to decide what's going to happen several years down the line. It's a case of the government after May. It's a case of each party that wants to be in government putting that in their manifestos. So that's a matter for the parties, it's a matter for the electorate. That's not something that the current Scottish government, I think, can really put in place at this time. Would be my comment on this. But in terms of what the motion is, I welcome Scottish Government investment in the city. I welcome any investment in the city when it's for something I think will benefit the people of the city. For that reason, I'm supporting Councillor Many's amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hutchison. Councillor Malik.
Thank you very much, convener. It's very sad that SNP councillor, especially Councillor Cameron, actually started his whole speech political, and we are basically the SNP councillor are making this committee as a political election campaign for 2021, and then he is giving us lecture that we are actually politically motivated for this committee. That's not true at all, because we should focus on education. And Councillor Minnie mentioned in her speech that Scottish government is doing a fantastic job, but she, I think, completely forgot that they are not doing a fantastic job. They have to provide funding as us as well. And for many years, we are the lowest funded council in Scotland. But what about the Barnett formula, which means more money coming to Scotland to help SG support early learning provision as well? And it is their statutory duty, but Scottish government is doing just funded for 1 year, 2 years, and that's it, all over. So please do not just go again and again, just a whole committee you are actually politicizing just for the election campaign. and focus on the main issues which we are actually having in this city. And I think administration is doing absolutely brilliant job. And that's why our education is main priority, and it will be main priority. But you are dragging the politics in this committee and it should not be. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you very much, Councillor Malik. Councillor Dunbar.
Thank you, Convener. I'd like to just briefly echo the comments from Councillor Gregg and Councillor MacDonald. I think it's too premature at the moment, as we haven't determined what the final spend will be on this expansion of early years, and therefore we don't know at this stage whether actually all the costs will be fully funded by the Scottish Government. And until such times as I think we get that information, then it's misleading to claim that costs are being fully funded.
Thank you, Councillor Dunbar. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Convener, for allowing me to come in. I would be supporting you and the recommendations as they are on the papers. Throughout today's proceedings, I've already intimated that it is difficult for us doing committees like this. But I want again, on this particular item, I don't find it helpful for the interjections or slights that are being picked up by the opposition. Furthermore, I am a mother and a mother of 3, and I've lost one too, for the record. But I will take no lectures from Councillor Cameron, and I am completely 100% indifferent, in supreme indifference, to his comments about whether he's disappointed in any comments I might make from the administration. Frankly, the SNP government providing money to Aberdeen City Council and our children, our future, and we are all corporate parents, as I have said before, they are doing their job. We do not know how it is actually all going to pan out. There have been situations before when we talked about us going back a few years, free school meals, free school breakfasts, and how the council had to bail the situation out, rising to what we were told to do by the SNP government. I would point out that quite often Aberdeen has lost money and it has actually gone to the central belt. Yes, welcome money to help our children, but the comment that is in the amendment from Councillor Many does not in any way add to the content on the recommendation. All it is actually doing is trying to give a pat on the back to the SNP government in an election year. And in my view, they are bankrupt in many areas, and I don't mean financially. So really, they need to pull themselves up and just get on with the job. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Alphonse.
Thank you, Convener. At the moment, increasing the entitlement funded by the Scottish Government for all 3- and 4-year-olds, which gives them and their working parents 30 hours per week. That's amazing. I wish I'd had that when my 2 were small. As it's also the extended entitlement for looked after 2-year-olds. The care and early learning of our under 5s is paramount. And I totally support Councillor Many's amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alphonse. Anyone else wishing to enter debate? I don't see any other hands. This is your last opportunity to shout if your hand's being obscured.
Yes.
Oh. Hello, Councillor McGregor.
Thanks very much, Convener. I think, in essence, what you do is you welcome money, because that's encouraging the continuation of a funding stream, we hope. I think to say, oh, that's your job. This funding is transformational. And one of the main things that's wrong in life is the gap between rich and poor. You like to think everybody's equal and everybody has a chance. But some folk have no chance at all because of the poverty of the family that they're born into. We shouldn't have that. So we should welcome an opportunity to do something about that. I mean, that's not political. That's just humane. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. Mrs. Dunsmuir, is there anyone else?
Not that I can see, Convener, no.
Councillor Many, over to you.
Thank you, Convener. This is not a political amendment. It is an amendment acknowledging that this is a very welcome funding package which will allow transformative early learning experience in the city. In answer to Councillor Gregg's point, and I absolutely understand that point, in terms of the wording, it was taken directly from the report. In terms of ongoing commitment, the Scottish Government's commitment is to give every child the best start in life, and that includes early years education. And in response to the political comments made in debates, hopefully beyond May, the SNP will be in the position to commit to that. I didn't want to draw into beyond May, but political comments elsewhere has led me to make that point. Again, I'm not going to be drawn into political debate on anything else. This amendment is solely to welcome the funding package for early years and the massive benefits it will bring to the city, which I highlighted in my opening statement. Surely, as a committee, we want to welcome this money coming in, which will massively benefit the children in this city in their most formative years. We want to encourage this type of investment to continue. Not taking this amendment, and for seemingly some members being angered by this amendment, I feel is the political motivator, not the amendment itself. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Many. I guess just to pick up on that last point that you were making about people being angered, I'm not sure that people are angered, and I'm certainly not angered by the investment at all. I think it's a hugely important investment. I think, you know, the expansion of early learning and childcare, as I think Councillor McGregor stated, will be transformational. I suppose that the issue I've taken is that in the lead up to an election, we are congratulating the Scottish Government for ultimately doing what governments should do. They should provide services and support to their citizens. And they do that by investing money, taxpayers' money. I agree with almost everything that everyone who's entered debate has said. Councillor Gregg welcomes the investment. However, where I disagree with him is I don't think we should be grateful for it. I think it's absolutely right and proper that the Scottish Government do invest money in these types of policies. I think I'll draw a close at that point, but I would ask people to support the recommendations by officers. I think they're absolutely sufficient. Yes, I welcome the initiative, and yes, I welcome the money. I'm just not sure that we need to be advertising that fact. Mrs. Dunsmuir.
Thank you, Convener. The committee has put a motion in the name of the Convener, which is to approve the recommendations as they are in the report, and the amendment by Councillor Many, which is to approve the recommendations with the addition of the third recommendation as outlined. Would members please vote motion or amendment? Convener?
Motion.
Vice Convener?
Motion.
Councillor Alphonse?
Amendment.
Councillor Bell?
Motion.
Councillor Cameron?
Amendment.
Councillor Dunbar?
Motion.
Councillor Gregg?
No vote.
Councillor Hutchison?
Amendment.
Councillor Imrie?
Motion.
Councillor MacDonald?
Motion.
Councillor McGregor?
Amendment. Sorry,
Councillor
trying to get the mute off.
Councillor Many?
Amendment.
Councillor Stewart?
Motion.
Mrs Blackie?
Amendment.
Reverend Dix?
Motion.
Mr Murray?
Abstain.
Mr Paul?
Abstain.
Mr Sansom?
Motion.
And Miss Scott?
Abstain.
That's 9 votes for the motion, convener, 6 for the amendment and 4 abstentions. The motion's carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs Dunsmuir. That takes us on to item 10.2, early learning and child care admissions. Do we have any questions for officers? Sorry, Councillor Many.
Thank you, convener. It was just a quick one on the consultation on the policy. I note the administration leaders were consulted, which makes sense, but I believe that Councillor Bolton is a group leader rather than a council leader. So it's just to note that if group leaders were to be involved, there are 2 other group leaders in the council that should have been considered for the consultation.
Sorry, Mrs Dunsmuir, my understanding is that that would be the case for consultation on all reports. Is that right?
I believe the consultation that's referred to is in terms of the standing orders. So it's the admin leaders. It's possibly just the report's got the wrong terminology, but Mrs Shepherd has her hand up. I don't know if she wants to come in.
Yeah, that's my understanding too.
So it's just common practice for that to happen with any report going to any committee. Councillor Many.
Sorry.
Okay, I've got Councillor Dunbar.
Thank you, convener. It was just really a question around the Links Nursery and how, have they determined the 20% set aside of places, priority ELC cases? I'd like to also just, thank all the staff that have been involved in, the expansion of the ELC and the challenges, particularly just now going forward.
Thank you. Ms Shepherd.
Thank you, convener. We determined the 20% very much looking at the data coming through. I would be the first to admit it's not been an exact science this year, and we would intend to keep that figure under review. But our feeling was that actually it's probably the optimum figure in terms of making sure that the children get the best possible experience within their early learning and childcare too. But we would be proposing to keep that under regular review based on our experience over the coming year.
Thank you. Through you,
Are you happy with that?
Yes, it was just I think the Links Nursery, particularly because it's so closely cited to Aberdeen University, and therefore there may be, particular issues potentially around that with, people in the workplace looking for placement.
Ms Shepherd, do you have any further comment or?
No, I would absolutely agree with everything said there. I think it will be really critically important that we keep an eye on how that pans out over the coming months.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, convener. It's just for a little bit of clarity on the point that Councillor Many raised. The consultation was on the production of an admissions policy, not a paper coming to the committee. It just happens to be in the paper coming to the committee. So is it the case that for every policy that the council are going to produce, that only the administration leaders will be involved in any consultation? It seems to rather sell short the people of Aberdeen if when nearly 50% of the council representation is ignored until the paper is actually presented. So if I could just get a little bit of clarity in that, please.
Ms. Shepherd.
Thank you, convener. I think we've maybe not been terribly clear in the wording within the committee report, as Ms Dunsmore suggested. So the policy, when we actually wrote the majority of the policy, which very little of it has changed this time it's being presented to committee, we had a very, very extensive consultation period where we linked with a range of stakeholders, absolutely as you would expect. What we've tried to do, given that the Links Hub has just been handed over, for example, and the cross-boundary work that we've been doing, is just bring that policy bang up to date. And we were conscious that committee had approved that policy, so it was only right and proper that we brought those slight changes back through to you. The consultation that's described in the committee report is the consultation process in terms of getting the committee report ready for being presented. So apologies, I think the language that we've used has been a little bit confusing. We'll take that on board and make sure that we're a wee bit clearer next time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shepherd. That explains it well. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions?
Yes, sorry, I was trying to put my hand up.
Oh, sorry, Ms. Murray.
Right. I wanted to focus on page 77 of the papers in relation to St Joseph's Primary School and Nursery. Under the policy, a family looking for the youngster to go to St Joseph's in P1, lots of families in such a situation would want to send their children to St Joseph's Nursery. But if they do that, the maximum number of hours they can get per annum in the nursery is 600. And the expectation seems to be that they would find the 540 additional hours somewhere else. Now, it seems to me that that's far from ideal when we're thinking of 3-year-old, 4-year-old children. So I was hoping that we might be able to ask the officers to look at the possibility of expanding the provision at St Joseph's, possibly not for August of this year, but maybe for August of 2022, with a view to allowing families to use St Joseph's Nursery and access their entitlement to 1,140 hours per annum for their children. Seems to me it would not be ideal for a 3-year-old child to be going to St Joseph's for 600 hours per year and to some other establishment for 540 hours per year. That would not be beneficial for the child. So I was hoping that officers might be asked to look at improving things for August of 2022.
Ms. Shepherd.
Thank you, convener. I mean, members of this committee will recall that actually we started looking at developing the models very many years ago, actually, and we've had a number of different periods of consultation to help shape the models that are there within the policy, and were indeed approved last year when we first took this policy through. whilst many families did say that they wanted a place in their local schools, many did not. And whilst some families did say that they wanted to be able to access all of their offer in one place, many also did not. Many spoke particularly of a desire to split the offer across an ELC provider and a childminder, for example. So the decision was taken some time ago that we'd look very much across an ASG and offer genuine choice to families. So what we've done is make sure that there are a mix of different models across an ASG so that families can access the offer that best meets their needs rather than presume what all families would want. It will be very, very interesting as the policy is fully rolled out from August to see how that is received, and we'll obviously keep our arrangements under review. A key part in developing our policies has been where the investment in capital has come in, and in some cases, I mean, members will be conscious that, you know, we did get a good grant through in terms of capital costs, but you've still to make quite tough choices in terms of where you invest that money to make sure you get a good return on that investment. So decisions were taken around the capital programme based on how we thought we could spend that money most effectively in terms of offering that full offer to all families across the city. So in short, we'll continue to review how things have gone. There may be cases where we may review an offer that is available. It would, I think, be inappropriate of me to commit to anything for any one particular setting, because I think around this policy, we're going to have to look citywide and make sure we do the best thing by all of our families. But we would certainly be anticipating a fairly extensive period of review to check that we've actually got our offer in the right places for families.
Thank you.
May I come back on
that? Ms. Murray?
Thank you. Thank you for that, Ms. Shepherd. I hope that the review will lead to the kind of outcome that I'm looking for St Joseph's. I think there is an equity issue here. Families who are looking to send their children to P1 in Mile End will be able to access their full entitlement to 1,140 hours per annum in Mile End School. The same would apply to Gilcomston School. St Joseph's, families who are looking to send their children to P1 at St Joseph's will not be able to access the full 1,140 hours entitlement at St Joseph's. So I think equity across the different schools is an important issue here. But I'm encouraged by what you said, that all of this will be kept under review. And in terms of the capital spending, there's a very large amount of accommodation on the site at St Joseph's, which is currently not being used. And I think it wouldn't cost too much to turn some of that accommodation into appropriate facilities for the nursery school expansion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Councillor Many.
Thank you, Convener. I think Mr. Murray makes a very good point there. I was wondering, listening to that conversation there, whether we get a service update on this or put it as a TBC line in the business planner. Do you have any comment on that?
Ms. Shepherd.
Thank you, Convener. We're more than happy to keep members updated through either a service update or indeed an evaluative report when we're well into the expanded offer. I think for us to be really get a full sense of how things are going, we would probably really be doing that extensive piece of evaluation probably December time of this year, to make sure that any changes were then reflected in our admissions policy for the following year.
Thank you for that. Mrs. Blackie?
My question, thank you, Convener. My question is just around recruitment of early learning practitioners. Are we going to have enough staff and support staff to support these hours in our nursery?
Thank you, Convener. I'm happy to pick that one up. Yes, I'm confident we will have. We have had a number of internal members of staff who have taken advantage of opportunities to retrain as an early learning and childcare practitioner. We have made a number of recruitments to a range of different posts. And we've also had a fairly extensive piece of work where we've looked at moving many staff who were already employed by us in childcare services into the ELC offer. We're currently in the process of linking with trade unions prior to linking with our own employees who are on 39-week contracts to just get a sense of how many of those are still keen to move over onto a 52-week contract, and that in some ways will be the final piece of the puzzle. But yes, we're confident that we will have the staffing in place, and to a large extent it is already in place.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart?
Thank you, Convener. I really wanted to pick up on the point that Mr. Murray was raising, and I actually agree with him. Of the 90 or so places that are actually listed in the report, there's only maybe 4 or 5 that fall into the category that St. Joseph's fall into. And I suppose there is definitely an equity discussion to be held there. And I would hope that we could actually come back with some strong reassurance that there will be more options for St. Joseph's. It would be very unfair for a parent putting a child to St. Joseph's and then to get the remainder of the hours at another nursery. The logistics of that could be quite difficult if you have children maybe in St. Joseph's as in primary school and then collecting one from nursery. And whilst I take on board what Mrs. Shepherd says, if that were the want of many parents to be able to split the location of the nursery, I think that would have been reflected in the report. We would have seen more nursery outlets where you had 500 or 600 hours offered at one and then the remainder to be offered at another nursery. So I would hope that we can actually look in a very robust and positive way to try and increase the number of hours at St. Joseph's. And I would add that on at Skene Square School as well, and there are 2 or 3 others that fall into limited hours. Bramble Bray is another one that I highlighted. Sunnybank School, another one. Rams Family Centre, they're also restricted, or that one's maybe perhaps less restricted. So I would seek that reassurance. August is still a while away, and goodness me, we have got a lot of work to get through before then. So I would ask that we maybe look for that. Mr. Murray said looking at it for 22. I would be asking that we could look for that for 21, Convener, with your indulgence. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Ms. Shepherd?
Thank you, Convener. There's a really difficult line to balance, because what we can't risk is having an over provision, because obviously that then essentially wastes money on making, having too many places available. What we've tried to do is very much get a balance which offers best value and choice based upon the environments that are there for our children and young people. In some cases, the experience of a child who may be attending a setting from 8 till 3 will require, from 8 till 6 rather, will require quite a different environment to a child attending, for example, for 5 hours in a day. And we've had to look really, really carefully at where those capital programme investments are to make sure that we have got the money, the investment, if you like, going in the right place to offer that choice to families across an ASG. The other point just to make is that the admissions policy for ELC is quite different from the admissions policy for school. And a parent who actually would accept a place at one particular school would not be guaranteed a primary one place there, because the primary one place is very, very much determined by the address. What I'm happy to do as part of our review over the next year is have a look at the settings where we have had a more limited offer. In many cases, a more limited offer due in part to the environment that is available to us and some of the feedback that we have had. But I'm more than happy to look at that for next session. I think it would be extremely challenging to do that for August, as we're about to open up our ELC admissions process, and obviously really, really critical that we get the staff fully in place in the right places so that we're able to deliver on this policy come August.
Thank you, Ms. Shepherd. Councillor Many.
Thank you, Convener. It's just following on from Ms. Shepherd's response there. Can we consider maybe a timeline for taking this back, given the information she's shared?
Ms. Shepherd.
Through you, Convener, certainly in terms of us getting a sense of how things are going, I think we would need to be doing that evaluation once children are receiving their 1140. So I would propose that we would probably concluding that evaluation, that initial evaluation, December of this year, so that we can make any changes prior to opening up the admissions process again, end of January 22. So that would certainly be our timescale, if that's of help.
Can we get that on the business planner, Convener?
I think Mrs. Dansmuir will be added to the business planner, will it?
Yes, Convener, if it's going to be a report and not a service update, I can get that added on, absolutely, yes.
Okay, any further questions? Nope. We're happy to agree the recommendations in the report.
Agree.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 10.3 is the extension of Bucksburn Academy. There's obviously an exempt appendix to this, so I would just ask members to be mindful of that. We will go into private session when we discuss the appendix. So I'll open it up to questions. Anyone? Okay, in that case, oh, sorry, Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Convener. Just to say, I don't have any questions on 10.3, but I do have some questions on the